London, 1943. The war had reached a deadly stalemate. Hitler's armies stretched across Europe, and the Allies were planning their next major invasion. But there was one problem: no one knew where to strike. The Allies had chosen Sicily as the next invasion point, a strategic island that would open the gateway to mainland Europe. Yet it was also the most predictable choice. Hitler's spies were everywhere, and if he discovered the real plan, thousands of Allied soldiers would die before even reaching the shore. That's when an eccentric intelligence officer named Ewan Montagu and his brilliant but secretive partner Charles Comandelli proposed a plan so insane it just might work. Their idea: to plant fake invasion documents on a dead body and let it accidentally wash up on the coast of Spain, where Nazi spies could find it. The hope was that Hitler would read those documents, believe the Allies were planning to invade Greece and Sardinia instead, and move his forces away from Sicily. A dead man would become the key to saving thousands of living soldiers. But there was a problem. They needed a believable corpse. In a dimly lit morgue under St. Pancras Hospital, Montagu stared down at dozens of bodies. None seemed right. The man had to look like an airman who had died in a plane crash, and his body had to be preserved long enough to survive a trip through the Atlantic. After days of searching, they found him, a homeless man named Glyndwr Michael, who had died after accidentally ingesting rat poison. He was perfect. No family, no records, no one to ask questions. They dressed him in a Royal Marine uniform, gave him a new identity, Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, and began building an entire life for him. They slipped personal letters into his pockets, a love letter from a fiancée named Pam, a photograph of her smiling on a London street, a bill from his tailor, even a receipt for an engagement ring. To anyone who found him, he would look heartbreakingly real, a soldier who died in service, carrying with him secret documents about the war. Now came the most dangerous part: the delivery. A British submarine, HMS Seraph, carried the body inside a sealed canister disguised as top-secret equipment. On a cold April night, off the coast of neutral Spain, the crew gathered silently on deck. Captain Bill Jewell read a short prayer. The men stood at attention as the body, now Major William Martin, was gently pushed into the dark waves. The current carried him toward the Spanish shore. No one spoke. If this body wasn't found, or if the documents didn't reach the Germans, the operation would fail. And if it did work, it could change the course of the entire war. Major William Martin, as the Allies had meticulously crafted him, lay on the shore of Huelva, Spain, a quiet, neutral town buzzing with spies and informants. To the casual eye, he was just another drowned soldier. But the documents hidden in his briefcase would soon set the Nazis' plans ablaze with false information. Spanish fishermen were the first to find him at dawn. They noticed his uniform, the careful neatness of his belongings, and the letters tucked into his pockets. One man bent over the corpse and opened the briefcase. Inside were maps, letters, and highly detailed invasion plans, all meticulously forged by British intelligence. By mid-morning, the body had been taken to the British consulate. Montagu and Comandelli had anticipated this. They had known Nazi intelligence agents in Spain were always watching. Within hours, German operatives received word of the captured invasion documents. The beauty of the plan lay in its subtle genius. The documents were convincing, but not perfect. They contained hints that made the Germans believe the Allies were planning to strike Greece and Sardinia instead of Sicily, just enough to bait Hitler's paranoia. Meanwhile, Montagu monitored from London. Every morning he waited anxiously for reports. Were the Germans taking the bait? Were the documents being passed up the chain? Days later, news arrived. Hitler had ordered the reinforcement of Greek and Sardinian defenses, pulling troops away from Sicily. The deception was working. Entire German divisions were now in the wrong place, while the Allies prepared their real invasion. But there were tense moments. Spanish authorities grew suspicious. German agents almost discovered discrepancies in the corps's identity. Montagu's team had to carefully manage leaks, rumors, and accidental clues. One wrong move, a misfiled letter, a careless remark, could unravel the entire operation. Meanwhile, the Allies had to ensure the Sicilian invasion would proceed before the Germans realized the ruse. Ships assembled, soldiers trained, and planes waited over the Mediterranean. Every hour mattered. Montagu spent sleepless nights poring over reports, coordinating with spies, and quietly celebrating each small victory. A German patrol moved to Greece, a unit left Sardinia, another convoy rerouted. All of it because of a dead man. By mid-May 1943, it became clear that Operation Mincemeat was more than a clever ruse. It was a masterpiece of intelligence, timing, and human ingenuity. But the final test remained. Would the Germans act on the deception completely, or would a single doubter reveal the truth and ruin everything? The world waited unknowingly, as Hitler and his generals repositioned forces in response to a corpse lying on a Spanish beach. A corpse that was the key to saving thousands of Allied lives. The weeks after the body washed ashore were a study in nervous patience. In London, the rooms where Montagu and Cholmondeley worked were lit at all hours. The two men drank black tea without tasting it, measuring every interception, every rumor from Madrid, every movement on the German order of battle as if each could be the final line in a book they couldn't yet read. Reports trickled in, scrappy and tentative at first. A division earmarked for Sicily, ordered by high command to reinforce Greece. Troop movements halted, shipping reassigned. A cavalry regiment diverted to Sardinia. Every new telegram was a small explosion of relief. The Germans were taking the bait. On July 9, 1943, when Allied forces finally struck at Sicily in Operation Husky, the difference was brutal and immediate. Beaches met invasion with courage, but fewer prepared German forces. Air cover, naval gunfire, and the bloody courage of infantry did the rest. Where intelligence and logistics intersect, lives were saved. Convoys reached their ports. Airborne landings that might have been cut down by an extra division of seasoned troops instead found gaps and confusion. Those on the beaches and in the landing craft never read the forged letters in William Martin's pockets, but their survival was, in a quiet and terrible arithmetic, tied to them. There were close calls that could have ruined everything. Spanish officials inspected the corpse. A pathologist in Huelva examined him. Local curiosity nearly exposed the forgeries. Montagu and his colleagues had built layers, letters, receipts, a photograph of Pam, even a delicate smear of a love note written in a woman's hand, because they knew the enemy would look for the smallest human ticks that give away truth. A careless detail could have unraveled the narrative. Instead, the Spanish bureaucracy, a mixture of official laziness and opportunistic rumor, played into the plan. The documents made their way, thoroughly and predictably, into German hands. The deception moved like blood through a living machine. After Sicily, the operational impact was clear on campaign maps and casualty rosters. The strategic consequence was a little messier. Not every historian would later credit Mincemeat with single-handedly winning the island. War is never that neat. But in the months and years that followed, Allied commanders, careful, pragmatic men, would point to that diversion as one of the cleverest applications of limited resources. A small, surgical piece of intelligence that produced an outsized operational effect. For the planners in the quiet rooms of Admiralty and naval intelligence, it was proof that war could be shaped not only by steel and shell, but by stories. The human cost, when the facts were finally stitched into public record, was not a plot device to the men who made it happen. Montagu and Cholmondeley had used a man's body as a tool. The ethical weight of that choice did not disappear with military success. Glyndŵr Michael, at the time little more than an unknown casualty of urban neglect, was buried in Huelva with the false name the operation required: Major William Martin, Royal Marines. There were, later, family inquiries, historians, probes, and much public debate over whether the genius of the deception could or should excuse the means. Montagu himself, who would later write The Man Who Never Was, wrote with a solemnness that never quite banished ruefulness. The operation's success could be stated in dry operational terms, but the private ledger of cost continued to be balanced in the minds of those who had planned it. There was also a quieter twist in the aftermath. The sheer competence of deception had a ripple effect on how intelligence work was valued. Mincemeat hardened the idea, already forming in Allied circles, that misinformation could be a decisive tool. It encouraged bolder deceptions later in the war, more elaborate games of signal and countersignal that fed an adversary's expectations, until those expectations became weaknesses. Awards came in the long, official way that governments used to keep memory aligned with honor. Montagu kept his medals modest. Cholmondeley retreated into quieter work. Men at sea, sailors of the HMS Seraph who had watched a fake major slide beneath a black sky, remembered the weight of what they had done in different tones. Not triumph, but the strange, difficult knowledge that they had pushed a body into the world and by doing so had steered the fate of thousands. After the war, the story blurred between myth and fact. Montagu's book made Operation Mincemeat part of the public imagination. The corpse who wasn't a man became a figure in essays and films. The nuances, the Spanish informants, the local officials, the forensics that almost betrayed the plot, were sometimes trimmed in retellings for dramatic clarity. But the essential truth remained stubborn. A small team of imaginative officers had crafted a story convincing enough to fool the Nazis and consequential enough to shape a campaign. And yet the final, strangest twist belonged to history itself. In a campaign measured by maps and margins, this was one of those events where intellect triumphed not because it was mightier than armaments, but because it found a place where human systems trusted documents more than doubt. It showed that war is as much a contest of belief as of force. If an enemy believes a falsehood fervently enough, he will act upon it, and the believer's actions can be as decisive as any rifle. On late nights in the years after the war, Montagu would sit and think of that anonymous man whose body had been given a soldier's name. He would remember the careful way the letters had been folded, the rehearsed naturalness of a fingernail or a cigarette burn, the minute artistry that tipped a stranger's curiosity into conviction. He would remember the taste of success, necessary, bitter, and forever complicated. In the end, Operation Mincemeat was not simply a trick. It was a luminous demonstration of wartime intelligence at its most artful, a plan conceived with cruelty and tenderness in equal parts, executed with stubborn patience, and ending with the uneasy knowledge that sometimes the cleverest missions are the ones that leave you proud and unsettled in the same breath.